Could not pick up biology because I had seen videos of frogs being dissected. Grades are just a foot in the door. They were most touched by her learnings at McDonald's because that will take you to that application that's a game changer. And there is no figuring out. I'm sorry, that's my opinion because I was just like, there's no room to fail.
Welcome to Unfiltered Espresso, the podcast where we ditch the textbooks and chase adventures with incredible people. I'm your host, Seher Sharma, and I'm thrilled to have with me someone who wears many hats, a change maker, a Harvard grad, and someone deeply passionate about transforming education in India, Monica Peswani. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
So, firstly, I just want to rewind a little bit. So you grew up in India. What moments or experiences sparked your interest in the education space? Because I was looking through what you did, and you pursued engineering first, right? After high school, I believe. How was the shift from engineering to education? How did that go about?
So I feel like my life has been about a lot of moments where serendipity came in or the universe has taken me from one pivot to another. Haven't been too planned about things, but I feel like the world of education was something that I grew up in. So my father was a tutor at some point in time to children from public schools across India. My uncles and my aunts are school leaders of public schools. My mother was a music teacher. So somewhere
Oh,
like the world of education in different ways and forms was a world that I grew up in. But I feel like because I grew up in a grade centric education ecosystem, and only when I was 25, when I enrolled into Ashoka University, did I see that education can be beyond grades, and education is about unlocking human potential and not just about grades. So I think that led to a major pivot in thinking first, where I was like, we are 100 students in a classroom that are experiencing a kind of education that I did not even know existed. To then having that desire of how can I bring this form of education just to my community. And that kind of slowly, snowballed into what I do today.
okay. How did the engineering thing come into play? Is my question.
So again, grade centric world, right? So I
Okay,
did
yeah.
really well in the 10th. So I had to pick like science because it was a given when I was growing up. Could not pick up biology because I had seen videos of frogs being dissected, and I was like, that is something I cannot do. So took computer science by default. So that was what I meant by like, things have just happened. And then post like high school, it was all about picking engineering because at that
Yeah.
point in time, in the world of science, my options were limited. I went for electronics and telecommunication because there was a part of me that wanted to become an astronaut. And there was someone who said, if you do electronics and telecommunication, that pathway could open up. So that is what led me to choose that
Oh
branch of
gosh.
engineering. I know, didn't happen. Not true. That's not the pathway. There are many other pathways, but that is what I was told back then.
Usually went back and forth from okay.
I know, many changes. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the Apprentice project now as well. So tell us about TAP for someone who doesn't know what TAP is. How did it all begin? Just a brief introduction first.
So my sister was a Teach for India fellow when I was in the corporate space, and I was setting up an artificial intelligence and 3D printing startup for a manufacturing company in Bombay, not connected to the world of education at all, but I used to volunteer in her classroom. So I say
Mm.
that she's the reason, or she was my guiding angel to get into the world of education, because when I volunteered in her classroom, and her classroom was in a public school where students from underserved communities were given access to what Teach for India tries to do is bring quality education into every classroom.
Yeah.
And that's when we realized that the potential of these students was incredible, but opportunities were limited. So I think somewhere there, I realized that because I had experienced what holistic education looked like at Ashoka, that desire came in of how do I bring similar solutions that could be brought at scale to more government schools in India. TAP was started because I was at that point interning with Teach for India, and I kept talking about holistic education. Someone told me there's another person who keeps speaking the same language, the two of you should meet. This ended up being my co founder. At that point in time, he was a Teach for India fellow. He was teaching in a government school in Pune. My third co-founder was also teaching in a government school in Pune at that point in time. And just because we kept speaking the same language and talking about holistic education, we got connected. And our vision has always been really simple. We believe that one, every child should have the opportunity to learn what they love. One aspect that's missing in the public school ecosystem is choice, right? You may enjoy art, I may enjoy dance, but my world is limited to academics if I'm in a certain kind of school. We wanted to bring choice as a medium of empowerment. So the first thing about TAP is every child chooses what he or she wants to learn through our program. The second is we believe that there are different kinds of intelligences. Not every child learns the same way. Howard Gardner's theory talks about 8 different kind of intelligences. So we wanted to support children in learning in a style that works for them. So some kids may want to learn through art, some kids may want to learn through science, some kids may want to learn through logical thinking. And our idea is, how do we give that to every child instead of telling them academics is the only means to learning? And the third thing is we believe that skills are what children need in this day and age. We call it 21st century skills, it's called life skills. The way the world is changing, children need to be told that these are certain pivotal skills that will help them design a life of their choice. So, what we try to do is we bring education to the level of the child instead of the other way around. Sair may be really artistic, Monica may not be really good at art, but Monica should not feel demotivated. So, Monica should get art at the level that she is able to consume. Monica should be shown a growth path that works for her. And most importantly, every child, irrespective of what level they are at, have a voice and have unlimited potential. And through TAP, we want every child to be seen and we want to help them tap into that potential that already exists within them through joy in learning. So that's really important to us.
That's very interesting. I saw the whole chatbot system that you guys have as well, and that's really, really cool. I saw a video of this one girl who I think she was talking about financial literacy and then how she went home and told her parents about how she learned investment and things like that. So, did you ever have sessions with parents as well, especially in the rural community? How did you go about like convincing the parents that okay, this is what your child does need? Because I think that would have been a little bit hard, right?
Correct. So right now our focus is the school ecosystem. Since all of these aspects, right, financial literacy is really, really new. So we look at it as we talk to the government about it because it's an important aspect we want to bring into the education system. We talk to school leaders, we talk to teachers, and parents are then brought into the ecosystem to support these children. And contrary to belief, parents are really, really excited about
Oh.
children learning things like financial literacy because the proof is in what children talk to their parents at home. So like you said, there are children who are designing budgets for their parents and the parents are really excited about the fact that children are learning something that can also benefit adults. We have something called as Utsav, which is like a year-end celebration for children, and parents are a part of it. And we have like experience booths that we set up. We have parents sitting down with their children, especially financial literacy, where they sit together and they talk about needs versus wants.
Oh my
What
God.
kind of investments do we want to have? What do we want to put in our saving pool versus our expense pool? And it's an ecosystem that's now coming together. And kudos to parents for supporting children through all of these different verticals that we bring in. Parents have been very, very supported. In fact, sometimes more excited than the children. So I would like to like put at rest the myth that parents would not want children to pick up this. They're more than excited. Like they've told us if like certain more individuals need to be looped in, they're the ones who are like, bring this in, add this to the program. So yeah, it's been incredible.
That's really great. I did not expect that. So let's move on from TAP now. Major question. It isn't easy to get into Harvard or any of the top universities for that matter. Do you think you could have started TAP or everything you did, your entire journey, if you went elsewhere? Do you think you could have gone through the same entrepreneurial journey? Because not a lot of people get into their dream universities, right? So,
So TAP was already in place before I went to Harvard. We had set up
oh,
TAP. TAP was running on the ground, and Harvard came in as an opportunity. I would say who I am today and how I see leadership and social impact would not be the same if I didn't go to Harvard. I feel like who I am as a person and as a female entrepreneur changed because of my experiences at Harvard. And just to put it out there, I applied to many colleges, got a lot of rejections, and then Harvard happened. So while we think of it as one dream college, and we talk about success stories, there's so much more that happens at the back end. So yes, lots of failures, and that led me to the direction of things eventually working out through Harvard.
So you also attended a program at Ashoka University, right? So a lot of high schoolers right now are still not sure whether they want to stay in India or go abroad. Could you talk about your experience in India and your experience in US studying at Harvard?
Yeah, sure. So at Ashoka, I was part of the Young India Fellowship. It was a program on leadership and liberal arts. The focus was on experiential learning. The focus was on building holistic learning and holistic education. And it was a program very similar to what TAP is designed today, where the idea was how do we look beyond grades? How do we look beyond academics and focus on skill building that defines us and helps us unleash our potential? Ashoka per se was designed as an experiment in bringing holistic education into India. And I was very fortunate to be a part of that ecosystem. Ashoka also now has undergraduate programs where they focus on specialized technical skills. For me, Ashoka helped me see what education beyond academics could look like. And now, from what I've heard, there are multiple universities cropping up in India that give you similar experiences in one, skill building, second, building network and connections, and third, finding your own why. And my experience at Harvard was very similar because Ashoka uses pedagogies that are global pedagogies in driving education. I think one thing that set Harvard apart was the idea that there were folks from over 150 countries. And
Yeah.
I think that just becomes a very different kind of melting pot as to how you see whether it's change, whether it's your ability to design solutions, whether it's understanding the global ecosystem. And I feel there is merit to that because what I may be trying to design currently in India may have been designed and piloted and scaled somewhere else. And when you're in that global ecosystem, it helps you look at problem solving very differently. Like one of the biggest things was when I was there and I was talking about how can we change this in India, a classmate of mine said, why don't you say how can this be changed in Asia, or how can this be changed in America, right? Why don't we look at it from a global lens of problem solving? And I think that flavor came in from a university like Harvard. I also think that the kind of professors and the kind of pedagogies that exist in the Harvard ecosystem also help you to look at change making, innovation, or your ability to problem solve very, very differently. At Harvard, also, we had the option to choose subjects that we wanted to pick up. And I was allowed to design my entire academic journey towards my own why. And in some ways, that was very liberating because that's not an option I had received in India. So I think that also helped me learn things that, like something like game theory, I would have never picked it up elsewhere. Just like having exposure to that, like one of my courses at Harvard was actually an analysis of a book. And this
Oh,
was like a book that was published and it was about the reality of a certain experience in the US. But the entire course was about analyzing that book, and that in itself got me into writing and showed me pathways for myself that I wouldn't have explored otherwise. So
yeah.
yeah.
Did you ever experience culture shock when you went to US?
Oh, I did. I mean, so many of them. I think one I was just discussing with a friend the other day was I'm very used to like Indian family style meals and
Yeah.
everyone coming together and eating. Like, you order something for the table.
Yeah.
And when I moved there, and everyone was like, okay, I'm going to have this, and this is my dish. And there was absolutely no sharing. So we were sitting together, but there was no sharing. So to each his or her meal. And initially, I was just like, but I want that. Like, I want what you're eating. But these small things of like,
Yeah.
so like, the US is a little more individualistic in the way they
Hmm.
function as a society, came as a major culture shock to me. So, yeah, there was a lot, but there was also, I feel like each of these had their own reasonings, which helped me see do I want elements of that in my life? So also
Yeah.
got to question their way of life.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, for many high schoolers, last question about Harvard, but for many high schoolers, Harvard feels like a dream galaxy far, far away. What advice would you give to those aiming for the top schools abroad, especially, and especially while applying, things to keep in mind? What was your roadmap like?
Yeah.
So, just things like that.
I feel like early on, the focus should be on gaining real life experiences and as diverse as possible. Because what universities look for, and this is what I learned through my journey, that grades are just a foot in the door. What they are looking for are individuals who are authentic, individuals who are capable of telling their own stories, being vulnerable without the fear of being judged. So, grades can be one angle of how we look at ourselves. But early on, the more experiences that we pick up, I had a friend who interned or worked at McDonald's for a while. And when she talked about her journey at McDonald's, and like she got into Harvard, and when we were talking to the admissions team, they said of all the incredible things she had done, she was an entrepreneur, had created lots of social impact. They were most touched by her learnings at McDonald's and how that shaped who she was and how that taught her the value of humility. So I think it's about, living our life in the deepest way and gathering as many experiences as possible. I think from an application front, I would say no experience is too small. So vision board, vision board, vision board, drafts, drafts, drafts. Like I have written at least 20 drafts of my SOPs, and each one had a different version of who I was because I kept digging deeper and deeper through every draft of my application. And the next thing I would say is have a diverse pool of people who look at your application. So have some folks who know you, who can help you deepen existing experiences. Have some folks who don't know you at all. They'll be able to give you advice on, is that messaging coming through? But I feel like early on, focus on gathering these lived experiences, because when you put all of you together and send it to the admissions team, that is what they gauge. And that only comes through every kind of lived experience. Like I had a friend whose entire essay focused on how she was into animal rescue, and there was this one parrot that she rescued, and her entire essay, and she is like a major innovative AI tech entrepreneur in the US ecosystem. But her entire essay was around that rescue and what that meant for her and how that shaped everything she did after that. So I would say focus on lived experience and having fun, because that will take you to that application that's a game changer.
So what I'm noticing is most like the examples that you mentioned, they're very personal, very random, firstly, and they like random stuff.
Yeah,
So
I mean, put yourself out there. I knew someone who, like, his entire application was a poem. And it was about, like, again, lived experiences that he's had. There have been folks who've used, like, art as a medium to convey who they are. So it is about not taking yourself too seriously and talking, like, I talked about my failures in my application. Like, I talked about how, like, there were so many moments when I was so sure things are going to work and they didn't. And talking about that journey is important as well. So
yeah,
authenticity through lived experiences is what they look for. That's
yeah,
my understanding. Please, like, a disclaimer
yeah,
out
of
there.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard about this one application that was a love letter, and I don't remember which university that student got into, but I think the craziest applications are the best ones.
Yeah. And I would say, like, there's so much power in authenticity. It is about what's the way in which you want them to see you, because there are multiple pieces that go together. There's like our GRE GMAT score, there's our academic journey, there's something that we've done in public service, there's a work experience. And I remember a mentor of mine telling me through each of these pieces, they see a flavor of you. So they need to see all of you. And that's why vision boarding is important, because even what goes through in your letter of recommendations is a flavor of you. So you need to ensure that they see all of you together in the most authentic way.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Fulbright Scholarship Program now. I'm just going to give a short brief for people who don't know what it's about. So the Fulbright Program is a prestigious US government-sponsored exchange program that offers scholarships for students, scholars, and professionals to study, teach, or research abroad, mainly for master's or PhD programs in the US. Each country manages its own selection through the local US Embassy or Fulbright Commission. The application process is highly competitive and requires academic records, recommendation letters, personal statements, and strong research or leadership qualities. As someone who studied abroad and worked on global initiatives, what advice would you give someone who's looking to apply for competitive programs like Fulbright or even something else in the future?
So each scholarship is different in the way it looks at the kind of individuals they want to kind of support through their journey. So Fulbright, for example, looks at individuals who want to come back to India, use global learnings to either accelerate what they've been doing in the Indian ecosystem in the past, or bring in more programs or social impact or social change solutions into the Indian ecosystem. So it's important to research into which scholarship or fellowship best suits your particular journey. In case of Fulbright, one thing to always remember is Fulbright works a cycle prior to, so if I want to go to a school in 25, 26, my Fulbright scholarship comes to me in 23, 24. So it comes one academic year prior. So
Okay.
always Fulbright is 1 year prior before you go to school. So that's important. The second thing is, again, Fulbright looks at, and this is my individual understanding, Fulbright is focused on why are you so passionate about bringing about the change that you desire in the Indian ecosystem? How do you think you are the right person and how are you equipped to bring about that change? And then they look at what is it that you're going to study abroad and what kind of practices and solutions can you bring back to the Indian ecosystem. So their focus is very heavily on building change makers that can transform the Indian ecosystem. So if one of you are in this particular space, Fulbright could be a great like support or scholarship for you to go on this journey. So every kind, there's INLACS fellowship, there are multiple fellowships with a very key focus on what kind of humans do they want to support through this journey.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Was there a main project that you had to give for Fulbright? Was there like a project? So, what was your project for
So we
Fulbright?
had to it was similar to an SOP. So we had
Okay.
to talk about what is this change. From what I remember, it's been a while. What is this project or solution, or like, they were supporting folks with research. So what is that research project that you want to work towards? Which university will support you? How will that university help you upskill or be the right partner for building this solution? And then how can Fulbright kind of support the journey? So for me, it was about scaling TAP and
Okay.
bringing more global solutions into transforming the Indian education landscape.
Okay.
So I focused a lot on bringing holistic education at scale and how studying at the Harvard School of Education would help me bring in pedagogies and mentorship. And, at the Kennedy School would support us with systemic change.
Mhm. Okay. So moving on from the whole education aspect, so we often feel like we need to have it all figured out by 16, grades, future success. The standards today are so much higher than what they were just a few years ago. So what advice would you give to teenagers who feel overwhelmed by these crazy expectations?
That's a hard one. I would say, and I mean, I feel like age is just a number, and I know that we've heard this so many times, right? And like it bounces off when folks say this, but I feel like there is so much truth to this. I feel like it's important for everyone out there to know that nobody has it figured out. Like my closest mentors who've changed my life are individuals who in their 50s and in their 60s have pivoted to start doing what they do today and have become the change makers that they are today. So one, you have unlimited time in this world and there is no figuring out. I'm sorry, that's my opinion, but I feel like we
So
keep
good.
evolving as we go. So there is no one point of like, aha, I've figured it all out. So I would say, like, relax. My
Yeah.
other piece of advice would be have fun. Like, I cannot, like, say this with more belief. Have a lot of fun, focus on connections, focus on saying yes to things that make you laugh, focus on saying yes to things that make you slightly nervous, because I feel that connection leads to confidence, confidence leads to action, and action leads to clarity. So
Yeah.
when we chase clarity, we're chasing this big mammoth thing that is supposed to have all the answers and tell us what next. I believe that's like that's a construct that's created for us to stress us out. So
Yeah.
like the idea is the more fun that you have, clarity and action and just going towards what's meant for you will come your way. And also don't focus on grades. I'm sorry to say this, but like grades are one part of your reality, and we are so much more than that. And we are already enough. So we are perfect the way we are. These are just like, frills on who we already are. So, yeah, like grades just define us in a small, teeny, tiny way, aren't our identity at all.
Okay, I'm gonna sidetrack a little bit, but I'm curious to know how were you like in school as a student? Were you ever a debater, leadership positions? Yeah, okay, seems like it.
So one, I was a class A nerd, and nerd in the way that I had to come first in class. So the reason I'm saying what I'm saying, folks, is through a little more lived experience where I chased grades and thought that is life. It's not. So yeah, I for me coming first in class was really, really critical, to the point that if I would come second, I would bawl for an entire weekend, assuming that my life is over. So I was one of those. Yes, I feel like debate club, elocution competitions were a part of who I was. Also, because I think in some ways, competition fueled me. And
Yeah.
it took me a lot of time to realize that there is healthy and unhealthy competition towards self. But I think debates, elocutions, just also theater in school kind of helped me connect with who I really am as a human being, and goes back again to whatever led me to have fun, helped me find who I am.
If you could like change your subjects, what would they be?
Ah. So I recently met someone who's studying history. And I feel like it's such a fascinating world. So I would again pick like a mix of courses. I would definitely pick entrepreneurship. I would pick history. I would add in a minor of dance and like maybe create something that did not make sense to others but truly resonated with who I am.
So dance, theater, you're quite the all-rounder.
I feel like I'm just curious. Like these are things where I'm just like, again, it sounds like fun. So I want to like try it out because why not?
Were you ever into leadership positions in school?
I was, yeah. So I was like the school head girl and then
Oh
the deputy
wow.
head girl before that. Like I said, because I had to be a perfectionist, that was the pathway to go. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I feel like more more than the leadership position, it was again the community that came with it. That was,
Interacting with
yeah.
people, yeah.
So that was fun.
So let's talk about failure a little bit. Have there been moments where things didn't go as planned? I know you talked about failure before also. So how did you bounce back from that? And you just talked about bawling your eyes out after not coming first in class. So I would love to know.
Okay, so that example says I haven't been the best at dealing with failure. I mean, in the beginning, failure was really, really hard because it shattered how I saw myself.
Hmm.
And I think I grew up believing that failing is bad. It's the worst thing that can happen to me. And that became how I saw my journey or my direction in this world, where I approached things very, very cautiously, because I was just like, there's no room to fail. You have to be perfect and, like, present your best self at all points in time. And as life would have it, even after being extremely cautious, failures were a part of the journey. And I feel like I also realized through failures that my internal narrative towards myself was very harsh in some ways, where because I had to be perfect, there was no room to be me. And I think failures took me closer to being more authentic. My relationship with failures has gotten slightly better only over the last couple of years. full disclosure. I still struggle with it because I'm a really competitive person, even with myself. But I think one thing that's helped is making failure your friend in some ways. Like with my team, we talk about this very often, where we say, I will make a new mistake next time. It's not like I'm not going to make a mistake. I am very confident that I am going to fail. That's one thing I'm very, very certain about. But I'm going to make a different kind of mistake. I'm going to make a new kind of mistake. So I think that took the weight off my shoulders, where it was not about not failing, it was about finding curiosity in failure. Like I fail very often, I fail now, and now I also am very, it's easier to talk about failures because it's not a big deal anymore. And I think the way I bounce back is, one, I allow myself time and space to feel the hurt that comes with failure. Like for a lot of time, I tried to be like, okay, failures are good, like the narrative that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
like, it's a friend. But I feel like inherently accepting that it's hard for me to fail, sitting with that discomfort that comes with failure, giving myself time to wallow and ball, or like, yeah, lose my mind. And then being like, now I'm ready to move to the next step of, okay, this failure happened, life's not over.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's like a really slow journey of sitting with the failure. I haven't tasted, but I'm not scared of it anymore. I think that's where I'm at this point in time.
So, did you ever get rid of the perfectionist mindset, or does that still linger?
Oh God, if folks can coach me, please do so. I'm fine. I feel like it again goes back to how I see myself.
Yeah.
What I'm focusing now on is a more kinder narrative with myself, and that in itself reduces the pressure I'm putting on myself to be perfect. Uh, it's a work in progress. I would say in some areas I've learned to let go, where I'm just like, it doesn't matter, nobody is going to notice if like this one font is not where it's supposed to be, it's fine. But there are other aspects where like I'm very, very particular about things, and again, that's a part of myself that I'm learning to accept as well, of like there'll be some things where I'll always be a perfectionist, and that's okay as well.
I relate to that. One last question. What would you say to a student who feels like they're just average?
Honestly, I hate that terminology because
Yeah.
the minute I say I'm average, it's in comparison to something else or somebody else. And so the other day, I was watching this video of a very famous chess player who was dancing.
Hmm.
And let's use the word average. Like that individual was an average dancer. And it just got me thinking, what if he defined himself as an average dancer instead of an amazing chess player? And I feel like that takes me back to, who are we comparing ourselves to? Like, I fundamentally believe that we are all enough and we are all incredible in our own ways. For a lot of us, including myself, we may not have found that what lights me up and what is my thing that makes me shine and sparkle. And that's fine, but it exists. So, one, I don't think there is average. I think we are all special and unique. And to anyone who, like, with, if I was to even take that word on, I would say the world wasn't changed by perfectionists. Like, there is, even if I see myself as not the best at something, it only tells me there is room to grow and there is room to get better. And I believe those are the people who've changed this world, because there is somewhere to go, there is some place to go.
Yeah,
And I think that fuels us in so many different ways. So we're
that's
all
true.
incredible.
Okay, let's speed things up a little bit. So we have a thing called instant brew round here, which is kind of like a rapid fire round. So I'm
Okay.
gonna hit you with questions, quick answers,
Okay.
and okay, let me do a 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Did you have a high school superlative?
Drama queen.
Do you want to explain that? Maybe we can extend that.
Everything was always big, over the top. No moment was subtle and calm. Everything was explosive in some ways or the other. So yeah, they just said wherever Monica comes, drama follows. So yes.
A myth about change makers that you want to bust.
That we are fueled by passion and we are not scared. We are scared all the time. Like, oh God, the amount of fears we have and uncertainty there is, it's all there.
One Gen Z slang you secretly love.
Main character energy.
Ooh,
I
nice
love
one.
it. I love it. Yeah.
What's the subject you hated in school?
I hated something because I wasn't good at it, not
Yeah.
because I hated it. So I wasn't very good at math. So let's say that's something I didn't enjoy much.
Fair enough. What's
Hmm.
one book every teenager should read?
I feel like The Alchemist because teenagers these days are already asking the difficult questions and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful journey to go on. And another one, Palace of Illusions. I just feel it makes us women see life very differently.
I've heard Alchemist from so many people. Should pick it up.
Should.
Uh, what's one word that describes your Harvard journey?
Metamorphosis,
One word that describes your Ashoka journey.
discovery.
Most used app on your phone.
Currently, ChatGPT makes
Oh
life
my
easy.
god. What would be the second? Are you the person who scrolls on Reels as well? Do you like doing that?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I should do less of that. I'm working on it, but yeah, doom scrolling. Need to do something about it. Yeah, happens.
If you could, okay, now a lot of new subjects are being introduced into a lot of I'm in ICSE, so a lot of new subjects like fashion designing, legal studies, new subjects. So if you could introduce one new subject, what would it be?
Interesting. Something around play. Like I would want to go back to games that we played as children. And I know that 16-year-olds these days are very different from the world that I saw. But
Yeah.
I've realized that inner child connect has the power to change how we see ourselves, how we see the world. And I feel like play leads to connection of the heart. So something around play, but not competitive, sports kind of play, like connection based play. Yeah.
What's one song that always lifts your mood or your go-to karaoke song? Either.
फिर ले आया दिल.
Okay, last one.
Yes.
Best piece of advice you've ever received.
Whatever is scary, go ahead and do it. The fear is telling you something about yourself.
That's a nice one. Okay, a few closing questions that I wanted to ask. What are three skills you think every student should start building right now as a 16-year-old, 15-year-old?
Okay, I'd look at it differently. I would say don't pressurize yourself with skills, but
Okay.
one, find something that lights you up. Like it could be a hobby, anything where there's a big smile on your face. That's like the easiest indicator. The second would be do something with a group of people. It could be in the realm of volunteering, it could be sports, but anything that puts you outside of yourself. And I think the third would be build your personal board of directors. As organizations, we always have a board of directors guiding us. And I feel like as individuals, if you can have like your inner trusted circle where you have a mentor, you have a peer, you have a visionary who helps you see yourself beyond what you see yourself, a critic who gives you real feedback. It's just a tribe that you're moving forward with. So start building that. It's sort of fun.
If you could send, this is actually quite similar, but if you could send one message in one sentence to every, let's say, 16-year-old in the world, what would it be? One sentence.
Hmm. You are enough. Focus on having fun. Everything else will fall into place.
Okay, perfect. Last one for today, and an answer which I think differs from person to person. But what do you think the world will look like in a decade?
I feel like we are moving towards some kind of balance. So I'm living in Oroville, and this is a place where people come to slow down, connect with nature. And I've also lived in really fast-paced cities, including New York and other places. And I feel like while there is one side which is moving towards high-paced tech innovation, there's also another balance of quiet revolutionaries who are trying to create more conscious spaces. And I think over the next 10 years, some kind of balance will start showing up where it's not just innovation to take the world ahead, but more intentional leadership, more conscious leadership, more grounded leadership, and solutions that offer pockets for both kind of individuals who enjoy the thrill and the pace, to individuals who want to ask the difficult questions, stay more grounded, stay connected to this world, and see how together we can design the dream world. And I honestly believe it's you folks who are going to make this happen, because you folks are so much more fearless that it's exciting to see what y'all can create over the next 10 years.
Okay, that was the last one for today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure was mine.
To our listeners, if this episode made you think, dream, or just feel a little bit braver, go check out the Apprentice Project. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Unfiltered Espresso. Be sure to stick around for a bit. Until next time, bye.